It's not just by random that I'm choosing these poems, right? I could have, yes, in some instances chosen other poems, but a lot of these are particularly famous. Number 4 is famous. Number 14 is famous, but to some degree, like they're famous because they do kind of crystallize the Henry character. They make it easier to understand. Like if you understand the dream songs, like to build that up for yourself, let's just do these bits and pieces in this way. Anyway, okay, dream song number 14. Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. After all, the sky flashes, the great sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn, and moreover, my mother told me as a boy, repeatingly, ever to confess you're bored means you have no inner resources. I conclude now I have no inner resources because I am heavy bored. Peoples bore me, literature bores me, especially great literature. Henry bores me with his plights and gripes as bad as Achilles, who loves people and valiant art, which bores me. And the tranquil hills and gin look like a drag, and somehow a dog has taken itself and its tail considerably away into mountains or sky or sea, leaving behind me, wag. So this to me is like another kind of like fulcrum. Like we get already by 14, obviously we get a bunch of like clues to Henry's psychological woes and the things that he has to go through, perhaps physically, if he's, let's say, hospitalized, like if we choose to do the interpretation in that way. But this is also a reality of like people that feel like Henry, right? People that have this despair either because of something concrete or something that they can't quite name. And I've experienced these things myself, so I could sort of speak from experience, and I'm sure John Berryman could speak from experience, and Henry in the cosmos of this book is going to speak from experience. Like once you cultivate problems, especially if they're self-created problems, life, friends, is boring. Like you get fucking bored, like trying to correct your problems. You get bored of the overcompensations, right? You get bored of the demands put upon you. You get bored of the world telling you, whether or not the world actually tells you, or whether or not you simply have this perception in your head over and over again, as I do. The world telling you, like, great literature, great art, these are the only things that matter. Focus, focus, focus. Do. Write. Think. Read. Wonder. Right? At a certain point, you will think like, what is this all leading to? What is the point? Why am I doing this? What am I getting out of it? Is somebody else getting out of it? To just bring this back to the kind of more specific issues that Henry is dealing with. Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so, right? Over and over again, Henry is hiding from the world. That's how the dream song number 1 opens, right? He's hiding the day, right? This is just a variation on that. We already have that slice of Henry. We have that second slice. We must not say so, right? This is Henry saying that we could go through these things and we could constantly be in a situation where we want to hide the day, but we can't also say it, right? And we can't say, fuck you to great literature, and we can't say, fuck you to the world's expectations. Again, whether or not they are actually making these expectations on you, eventually they will, right? They always do. And I mean, like, look how this is phrased. After all, the sky flashes, the great sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn, right? Because like in that kind of like, Robinson Jeffers sense, like the world goes on without you. The sky's going to flash and it's great, right? The great sea will yearn, and that's great. Like imagine your personal yearning. Imagine the yearning of the sea. Yeah, it's true. The yearning of the sea is just limited, just purely by its kind of like I guess, physical objectification, like like the yearning that it does is, the Wallace Stevens seek for shores from Sunday morning, seek for shores like with inarticulate pang that we never find. I think that's the line. Like what has that? How does that open? It opens with, is there no change of death in paradise? Does ripe fruit never fall? Or do the bows hang always heavy in that perfect sky, right? So, and we get this idea of like the great sea yearning, right, with inarticulate pang, right? This is the extent that the sea is able to do that. Like, you could say that human beings can do more, right? Human beings are capable of more, but in a sense, you're just kind of fulfilling the same kind of requirement, right? Like in the kind of basic, evolutionary sense of, how did life start, right? The theory now obviously comes from, we have molecules that are de facto competing one another in a purely like molecular sense, right? You have molecules that are trying to be, the molecules that, loosely speaking, survive, and eventually with enough heat, eventually with enough pressure, eventually with enough of these kind of like, I guess with enough of this stuff, you just get these environmental bottlenecks. You get a bunch of molecules that have an engine of its own, right? To quote James Emmanuel, to kill a mooring spider. My foot, or is in my shoe, an engine of its own, right? When he kills a spider. So ultimately, like, human beings are constrained by that same kind of engine, that starts like even like pre-life, right? We're all yearning, just like physical objects are, just like black holes are. Like, is that really special, or is it just fucking boring now? After a while, does it get boring, right? And he goes back to childhood, right? Ever to confess you're bored means you have no inner resources, which is like, you see this bit of a device all the time, right? Like if you're bored, it means you're boring, which is kind of true. Like the amount of people that I've heard in my life tell me that they're bored, you just wonder why. And Henry says, I conclude now I have no inner resources because I am heavy bored, right? I am now, I am now like that great sea that is yearning. I am the black hole that is yearning. I have a task to fulfill. But because I'm a human being, I have to think about it. I have a choice here. I could stop it. I have no reason to continue. The sea has no choice here, right? The sea is going to have to continue. The black hole is going to have to get bigger and bigger and bigger, assuming that it continues to eat, whatever is in its vicinity. But me as a human being, my mother's advice is not sufficient, right? That's not sufficient. Right. With this, and this part especially, right? Henry bores me. Look, I'm not sure like who's watching this right now, what kinds of things you've gone through psychologically, but don't you just get fucking so bored of yourself after a while, like trying to fix your own shit? You do, right? You get bored. You get bored with your same old problems. You get bored making the same old mistakes over and over again, right? And you see this like thing in your life, right? You see the same behaviors just kind of like popping up in front of you, and certain things you can't stop. Like with Henry, there's alcoholism, perhaps. There's like this kind of like staccato fucking slur like throughout the Dream songs. But like you get bored, and like my assumption is like Elliott Smith has this line about just simply being bored of drugs simply because of like taking them like too often, right? So Henry in that sense like is self-bored, right? Who loves people and valiant art, which bores me, and the tranquil hills and gin look like a drag, and somehow a dog has taken itself and its tail considerably away into mountains or sea or sky, leaving behind me wag, right? So like in a sense, like I'm just interpreting the stanza as the Henry character is just kind of like standing around, and just imagining kind of like, this solipsistic kind of thing, the world disappearing, and he himself just being this kind of extent of the world, and even the dog, right? Like the dog leaves, right? Like the dog takes its tail considerably away, right, into mountains, right? All that's left in the image is Henry, right? And the wagging, like, and not even the actual wagging, right? Because the tail is gone. It's in the mountains. Like Henry cannot see it. But he himself is left, like, perhaps the image of the wagging, perhaps the motion. Maybe it's the only motion that's present. Maybe it's himself that is now wagging. Maybe he feels like this thing, this boredom, this kind of, automated process that he feels and is bored of in himself, right? That's now the wagging, right? I mean, who knows? Like, again, like, look, just keep playing with the stuff. Like, this, like, are you really so fucking scared of this me wag? Of this, like, it's taken its tail considerably away. Is that really so scary? Like, you could keep playing with the stuff until it makes sense, right? And again, you're going to back to A$AP Rock, put the pieces together back, like, in my own way, right? You're going to have to do that. You're going to have to do that, especially in poetry. So don't be scared in that regard. Let's see. Do we have 14? Okay, so let's read 14 one more time. Let's just look at this guy. Let me just tell you who he is, or she. I forget who wrote this. Jeffrey Allen Triggs. This is 1988. Dream Songs and Nightmare Songs, The Balance of Style, and the later poems of John Berryman. So later, they don't mean the later Dream Songs. This is still the Dream Songs, but later as in, the Dream Songs themselves. They're some of the latest stuff that he did in his life. So let's read the poem one more time and look at what the analysis is given, because I remember thinking that it's pretty good. I think that's where I got my ABAB stuff from. Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. After all, the sky flashes, the great sea yearns. We ourselves flash and yearn. And moreover, my mother told me as a boy repeatedly, ever to confess you're bored means you have no inner resources. I conclude now I have no inner resources because I am heavy bored. Peoples bore me. Literature bores me, especially great literature. Henry bores me with his plights and gripes as bad as Achilles, who loves people and valiant art, which bores me. And the tranquil hills and gin look like a drag, and somehow a dog has taken itself and its tail considerably away into the mountains or sea or sky, leaving behind me, wag. So the critic, it's just a paragraph. Let's just go through this paragraph. So this is how the critic talks about this poem. This is a subtly organized poem whose theme is well realized in its language. The incessant ands and the persistent refusal of the syntax to come to rest. The literate colloquial tone all contribute to the poem's feeling of restless dissatisfaction. Berryman satirizes in particular middle-class ecstasy over the common functioning of nature. The sky flashes, the great sea yearns, which borders on pathetic fallacy. We ourselves flash and yearn. The speaker who does not respond to all this flashing and yearning must alienate himself from the mainstream of society, represented by his mother, and conclude that he has no inner resources. But even in the Bowlerian stance of the alienated or adversary poet is boring, as are the artificial paradises of tranquil hills and gin. The speaker himself is a wraith, an empty gesture, the wag of a vanished dog. All that is left standing is the elegant structure of the unrhymed stanza Berryman often uses, with its alternating long and short lines of the pattern AAB, AAB. Composing his poem with three such stanzas, Berryman aims at the local intensity of a sonnet within a sequence. Indeed, reviving the idea of the poetic sequence as opposed to the isolated, well-made lyrics of the new critics is one of Berryman's real contributions to contemporary American poetry. So I just want to talk about a couple things here. Berryman satirizes in particular middle-class ecstasy over the common functioning of nature. So I didn't quite see that before I read like this criticism, right? But I mean, to some degree, it's true, right? And in part, we're just saying like, you know, like people do ascribe. I mean, we said Robinson Jeffers, right? A lot of his poetry was about this specifically, right? So people do ascribe tons of meaning to sky flashes, the great sea yearns, we ourselves flash and yearn. But it's not just middle class ecstasy. It's also the ecstasy of someone like Robinson Jeffers. It's not just bourgeois values. It's also the ecstasy of someone like John Berryman himself at his heights. Like at his heights, he feels this. He feels the great sea yearning, right? He feels himself flash and yearn. So it's not, it's not necessarily pathetic. It can be pathetic. It oftentimes, perhaps usually it's pathetic, but I would just say, like, when Berryman satirizes in particular middle class ecstasy, the way that I would frame that is, I'd say that he poorly satirizes that, but there's other functions here, right? It's not just to give the satire, some space. What else did he say? Yeah, so Berryman aims at the local intensity of a sonnet. I mean, all these things, whether it's like, Don Moss's like loose sonnets, whether it's like the sonnets in V.S. Naipaul's novel in verse, whether it's these 18-line poems from John Berryman, these are all essentially like, like on some level, they all break down to the local intensity of a sonnet if we're going to be doing these like book length poems. Okay. Especially if like the poems are like individual, 10, 14, 18, 20, 24, whatever line poems, right? You're going to have to get somewhere local intensity. You're going to have to get somewhere, a local, compacting of meaning. And in some places it's going to be absolutely just like fucking stuffed. This poem is more stuffed, I think, than maybe a number 8. Yeah. So I mean, this is just kind of like, it's not the wrong observation, but just like above, like, it's not wrong to say that Berryman satirizes like a particular part of like, like bourgeois aesthetic, fine, but I would simply add that this local intensity is present all throughout. Like, this is not something that is unique to this dream song, to other dream songs, and it's certainly not unique to book length poems of like discrete poems of this type. Okay. Yeah, I mean, even to some degree, I'm sure you could find pages of like, Charles Olson's Maximus poems that do have the feeling of local intensity of a sonnet. Maybe that would be rare for a poem like that, but let's not read too much into this as being like specific to this sonnet number. Well, I call that a sonnet, but it's not really a sonnet, right? Dream song number 14. Let's see what else we got. Okay, I feel like if I go into 26, that would probably be just as long. I don't want to do this for too much longer. Anyway, I'm going to look through the comments, and I'm going to have a nice, even longer stream probably on Thursday to just do this other thing. I have a bunch of other poems I want to get through, and not just John Berryman. I want to talk about confessional poetry more broadly. I want to talk about, I'm not sure, maybe I should look this up to a degree. Charles Bukowski fits into the vein of, he clearly fits like in the sense of he has confessional poetry, right? Like in terms of like the meaning, the themes, the whatever, right? What he chooses to talk about, content, whatever. But is he technically like, in that school, if you want to call it a school or a movement, maybe not. But I think it's very useful to see, how these poems work, how Charles Bukowski's poems fail. And there's going to be some surprises as well on top of that. So let me just see if there's any comments thus far about this part of the stream. And again, guys, like, subscribe if you haven't. And if you leave comments, if you're just watching the stream after the stream is over and I can't comment in real time, I will see the comments and I will respond to them when I do, I guess, Dream Songs Part 2 stream on Thursday. So feel free. If we're not doing this live, I promise I'm going to get to your commentary. Okay, so we have nothing. Quiet night tonight. I guess it's pretty late. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will join you again probably earlier on Thursday. We'll go longer. We'll do the rest of the Dream songs. We'll get to the nitty-gritty of the blackface. We'll go through several pieces of criticism, including a long one when we finish the individual Dream songs, right? Because before I get you guys, and I'm going to say this in the next stream, but before I talk about like the elephant in the room, which, you know, unfortunately it's the case, like the blackface stuff. I feel it's useful to actually get through, you know, all the poems that we have here, and once that is done, we could assess like the kinds of claims that are being made, both pro and con, to, you know, whether or not John Berryman has, you know, engaged in something that is little more than a minstrel show.